Okay, here we are down in Dallas. It's chilly out here, but I went out for a walk this morning just in a long sleeve shirt. I'm really enjoying this winter weather that's payback for our horrible summers. It's every time in August I say, just wait, 6 months from now we'll be warm and having a nice winter time with we've already got buds on a lot of the trees out here. And before you know it, could have one more. We've had one more round of snow even later than this, I think. I think the latest was March 15th. But it's real nice being here in the Dallas area this time of year. But I'm heading out to California pretty soon. I think that might be one of my next trips, and I think I'll be up in Denver pretty soon with a company doing some TL work. Okay, as we're logging in, that's a little bit about what's going on with me here. What's going on where you are? If you would hit the chat screen, you can see in your panel, you'll have a little button there for chat, and only I can see your chat. So tell me where you're logging in from, and what the weather's like there, and if you'd like to say the name of your company, only I'll be the one to see it. And I just enjoy seeing where people are from as we get started. We have a lot of people signed up for this webinar. I'm watching the whoops, it says she's getting a dual voice here. I hope that's not happening to anyone else. Let's see, this is a chance to work out all the kinks in the webinar right here. So ISO 9001 crucial clauses, I'll come back to that in a second. I just want to give you this slide. If anyone is having connection problems, you want to just hit this. There's a little red bar, little pull down at the top of your screen. Just hit that and reconnect. And other than that, you can go just log out and go back into the link in your email and just start over, start afresh from there. So if anyone's having connection problems, just hit that red bar at the top. It'll bring a pull down, and you can click that reconnect button like this, like so. Let me see if this thing works. No, it's not what I thought. I'm going to turn that off. Okay, so anyway, you can use the reconnect button on this slide, and if that doesn't work, close your browser window entirely, go back into the email and start up again. Okay, I'm seeing there's snow. Somebody says it's spitting snow out here, heavy snow. Oh my goodness. We've got people who are not having nice weather like we are down here in Dallas. Well, that's it for the weather report. I know we've got just about everybody on who's going to be here by now. Maybe some will log in after the top of the hour, but I'll just say welcome to ISO 9001 Crucial Clauses. The 6-point CVs stress, but they can't say how to address. And the reason they can't say how to address is that certification bodies have to maintain their neutrality. But the DESARA Group is a consulting company, and this is me. I'm the vice president of the DESARA Group. And as consultants, we're allowed to talk with you about how to solve any nonconformities that we might find when we're working with you, any glitches in your system that you might want to talk to us about. What I really enjoy doing is getting into how companies use standards for improvement. So as we go into this webinar today, I hope that what you'll do is think of, okay, we are implementing ISO 9001 or possibly TL 9000 or ISO 14001, because there are a lot of clauses in these that are the same. And so if you've got multiple standards, these will add up. But I hope you're asking yourself not just, we're upgrading to get a certificate, but connect to the purpose of the change. What do you want this change to be for your business? And if you take that attitude into the next part of the webinar that we're going into about why am I here as a leader in this system, and what do I want for my business besides a certificate, you're going to get a lot more out of this webinar than otherwise. Well, I'm going to I'm here with my assistant and project manager, Teresia Barna. So she'll be answering for me on the chat window throughout. But we're going to start a poll now just so it helps me see who's in the room that we're talking with. And I'll just tell you the kinds of people who typically sign up for this. You can just answer these in the poll in the right-hand panel of your screen. But you're in the right place if you're leading an ISO 9001 2015 or another standard transition project. And you may be saying to yourself at this point, I'm running out of time, or I'm not really sure what has to change, or I can't have any false starts here. We're down to the end. I expect a lot of people on the call are in that leading transition range, but some people may be the leaders of those leaders, or business owners, business managers, operations managers, and maybe saying, yeah, I know this is happening. I want to be on top of it. I need to know what this means to me. Or maybe you're in the right place if you're an internal auditor. So yes, this is about implementation, but we're going to be doing so many things and looking at so many clauses in this webinar that have changed or are brand new, and you need to know what to look for. Maybe you're a supplier quality engineer. That would allow, this webinar will let you look for what you can hold your suppliers accountable for now and how they should be looking at your unique needs as a customer of theirs. And then we've got project managers who tend to log into this call. The project managers are particularly concerned with the risks associated with any projects, including the risk associated with the ISO 9001:2015 project. Because if you've got a design project, when do you transition over? We're not talking specifically about design, but we will be talking about risk in this call. And then anybody who's working for a certified company who may be in another role working in that company, but not a leader, not a manager, not an internal auditor or whatever. So I know some people just are just key players in other ways, and they want to know what's going on even though they're not leading. And then we have people here who are also here because they're also consultants. And I'm glad to share this with consultants. I'm super glad to share this with auditors, because this will help anyone who's working with other companies in a capacity of auditor or consultant do better for the industry. And my goal whenever we teach this webinar or others like it is to give people so much information that they can go out and use it right away on the job. And if by chance they need more help, I hope they'll turn to DESARA, because you've had a sample of the way we teach and what we do and who I am. And I tend to hire people like me. So hopefully you get a feel for the personality of the DESARA group through this. I'll tell you right now who's on the call. Looking at the poll, we'll close this down now, but looking at the poll, it looks like about half the people on this call are leading transition. And then there are managers and internal auditors, and not so many in the other categories. We've got a number of other consultants and business people who aren't involved in a certified company. So that's good to see there. I welcome everyone here, and I hope that you'll spread the word. We have one more offer of this afternoon, and then we shut it down for a while before we do another round of this class again. Try to put some new stuff out there. Now, for those of you who will stay to the end of the call, I have a special surprise for you at the end. You'll get a bonus. It's called Talking Points for Management Teams. Because one thing I get out of people who are leading transitions in particular is I don't have 90 minutes to explain this to my team, Karen. I get 20 max in a staff meeting. I have to call a special meeting and hope people show up, and I might have to call a second or third one. So you will get a condensed version of this webinar at the end. If you stay till the end, you'll get a download button for this, and you'll be able to share this in the condensed format with people in your team. But also going through that and sitting down and talking with your colleagues, other members of your leadership team, once this is over, will help lock it into your memory. So I highly encourage you to stay to the end and get this bonus that you can use. One more bonus we're having special for this round of webinars is our consultant, Mark Hale, has just put out his first book, Amusing Confessions of an International Consultant. And at the end of the webinar, I'll choose a lucky number, and that person who logged in, like if I choose number 6 or number 55 or number 208, whatever the number is I choose, that person on our enrollment list will get either a Kindle version or a paperback, their choice of this book. And I'd like to share it with you because Mark's a great consultant, and he's got just some humorous stuff, but everything comes back to the message of understanding culture and being able to laugh at yourself and actually making improvements through some tough assignments that he's been on over the years. Quick read, a lot of little vignettes. Well, when we consult with other companies around the world, and I'll give you an example of some of the logos of the companies we've consulted with, everything from small companies to some of the biggest companies in the world, we've found that the same things are difficult for all different kinds of companies who use management systems. And I'll just tell you some of the companies, and maybe you'll identify with some of these as yourself. And you can say, yeah, this is the webinar for me, and I'm going to learn some of the lessons that they learned about implementing a change. I've worked with companies who are just brand new to standards, and they want to improve performance. And we've had consultants, I did one of these just right after the standard came out in 2015, who were a big company. They wanted to be on the leading edge. They've had a mature management system, and they wanted to build on their strength. And they found that the changes in ISO 9001:2015 really were able to bring their company, as mature as it was, advantages. And then I had a new client last year who said, okay, let's upgrade. It was actually a TL9000 client because the DESARA group is experts in TL9000. We have more certified TL9000 experts than any other consulting company, actually than any other company in the world. There are only 30 of those TL9000 certified experts in the world, and we've got 3 of them. I think it's about 30, maybe it's gone up a little bit. But anyway, this was a TL9000 client who had one of those auditors you hear about who's retired standing up and had been letting them get away with murder for years. So we went in with a new standard and they're like, wow, a lot of things have changed. And I said, well, actually, a lot of these are things you should have been doing all along. This is a chance. If you've had a system that you feel there are a lot of weaknesses in, this is a chance to upgrade everything under the banner of, oh, it's the new standard. So if people say, well, we never had to do that before, say, well, it's time for change. And then one of the clients that we've worked with, and we've done a number of these, are global clients with many different systems. This is a good housekeeping time, a time to bring people who came in by mergers and acquisitions, get everyone singing off the same hymnal. So Teresa is putting up another poll right now, and I'd like you to answer what is the hardest part of transition for you? I've given you some examples of what those things might be, but the same things are always hard for all those different kinds of companies that we've consulted with, and it starts at the top, getting leadership commitment. If you have that, smooth sailing from there on out. You know, I mentioned to you, if you connect with the purpose of this change, you're miles ahead because you'll be so convincing and persuasive when you talk to people that this is something that we need to do now. If you've got leadership that's already saying that, you're miles ahead of the game. It's one of the hardest things to be sure you have in some companies. Understanding what to do. A lot of the project managers over TL9000 or ISO 9001 transition are saying, well, I'm pretty sure I know what the standard says. I'm just not sure what order or how to actually implement this. That it's kind of vague how it's written. And I intend to help you with that today. Sometimes having a plan to get it done. You've read it and you say, okay, now what order? Where do I start? We'll talk about that today and in our follow-on class that we have to this webinar. We'll be going through all of these items, getting everyone's buy-in, true commitment. And then there are the big changes, working with risk-based thinking, working with what is context of the organization, what does that mean for me, what do I have to do, how does this change for things like what we have to do in management review, and how do I get management on board for that, and simply finding the time. We're down to the wire. You know, this has to be done. Most of the audits will all be done by August at the latest. A lot of CVs want to get their final audits done in May in case there are troubles and they need to come back. So just the time. And funny thing is, first off, everybody was worried when this came about, oh my gosh, I've got to renumber all my standards. And by now, people are saying those baseline systems that everyone can work with, the documentation, getting the measurements on a database we can all look at, that's baseline. The other changes are much bigger. So now as I'm looking at the poll, I'm seeing that leadership commitment and truly understanding the standard tie for the top 2 in the feedback. That's about a third of the people on each one of those. And the next ones are getting buy-in and getting time. But you guys, if you're having trouble with leadership commitment or understanding what to do, I think what a lot of people need there then, and people who need time, nobody voted for planning, having a concrete plan to get this done. Well, if you've got leadership commitment, if you understand what to do, you'll find that the planning and the time begin to fall into place. Getting the buy-in from the leadership helps a lot. And that's what I hope you'll get from the bonus that we get out of here. And you'll make the time to sit down with people. But now we'll close the poll and move on. But that one that said understanding what to do is hard, yes, you need to start with knowledge and planning, and your leadership needs to know that too. So that's exactly what most successful changes of all those kinds of tales from the field I told you about had in common. The most successful ones had a designated leadership champion and a designated project manager, which is about half the people on this call or fall into one of those roles. More than half fall into that role. And when you have a clear business need, it gets done. You've got customers who expect it, or you've got a clear deadline by when it's got to get done. The second thing is when there was a knowledge gap, when people weren't sure what was, and you can chat. I'd like to hear any details on these kinds of things that are tough for you, and I'll see if I can answer some of those at the end. If you'll chat questions throughout as we go on things that you don't understand, I'm gonna try to go through the trickiest concepts, the 6 crucial clauses. But those or anything else that you're having trouble with, go ahead and chat your questions, and Teresa will pick those up, and she'll have them all ready for me at the end so we can do Q&A. Okay, and by the way, if I go too fast on any of these things, there will be a replay. There will be a copy of the full slide deck for you. It'll come out tonight in an email to you that you can then you look at tomorrow, fill in anything on your worksheet that you skipped. But recognizing your knowledge gap and filling it, today is the start of it. Hopefully you'll get enough to move on and fill some of those crucial clauses that you don't understand, but we go through all the clauses in our main course. So if that's something you need, get in touch with me and we'll talk about how to get your organization trained. Now, the plan is also, once you understand what needs to be done, you got management commitment, you get that commitment plan, but you can be a leader in any role. Like I said, connect with the purpose of the change, and if you're not the leader, then the leader is going to lean on you and really appreciate your support, and you will help your organization to be successful. You'll shine. You know, back in, forget what year it was, but I was taking my organization through an upgrade or a change where we integrated somebody. I had my best performance review of the year. I was one of the key members, but not the leader of the transition. I was just a business. It was fairly early in my career. I was a business unit contact for changes, and I had the best review of my career. You know, the one that only like 3% get, based on how I handled that change and led people through it. I made it my business to get the knowledge and really dig in rather than waiting to be told what to do. So if you're here, you're going to be one of those leaders in your organization, and I wish you great success. Okay, if you haven't been following along on your workbook, now's the time to be sure you get your workbook out, or maybe you're better just taking notes on your own sheet of paper, but that's why I don't give the slides out in advance, and I don't do that in my classes either. I like you to take your notes in your workbook or your own note sheet, and then go back and fill in the blanks later when you get the copy of the deck. It'll help you learn it, and it'll help you lock it in. So here we go with the 6 crucial clauses. Crucial clause number 1 is the very first clause in the standard, clause 4.1, context of the organization. And it says, to read it aloud, if you haven't read it yet, it says, in typical ISO gobbledygook, it says the organization shall determine the external and internal issues that are relevant to its purpose and its strategic direction. And I didn't highlight this, but it's very important, and that affect its ability to achieve the intended results of its quality management system. The organization shall monitor and review information about these external and internal issues. We'll talk about that last line later on in the presentation. We're going to focus right now on the first lines. And I've got some things numbered here. Number 1, relevant. Number 2, strategic direction. And number 3, intended results. So when we talk about what's relevant in your what internal and external issues are relevant, what does it mean by relevant? Well, relevant means that it has some bearing on your purpose and strategic direction of your business. Notice it doesn't say on the purpose and strategic direction of your quality management system. Now, this is such a crucial change in ISO 9001 and all the other related standards. This is in there in all the standards. They have common language in all those that are based on ISO 9001. This idea of what's relevant to your purpose and strategic direction of your business, because in the past, in many companies, the quality management system was something that sat alongside the way we really do things around here. It sat alongside of our goals for revenue, for mergers and acquisitions, for selling off parts, spinning off parts of the business, for growing in certain markets, okay, for growth, for revenue, for the things that keep leaders up at night. And quality was something to keep us out of trouble with making mistakes, or out of trouble with the regulators, or out of trouble with rework costs, scrap, things like that. But it didn't have to do with the big business objectives. This is a crucial change in ISO 9001 2015, and it's one of the purposes of this change is for you to work with your business to tie all that quality stuff, I say that in quotes and tongue in cheek, with the way the business actually runs. It's going to say later on about how leaders are responsible for that too. The third clause that I highlight here is intended results. Intended results of the quality management system in the past have been taken as, like I said, keep us out of trouble with the regulators, keep us from goofing up. We don't want any bad publicity, right? Keep us away from the negatives. Keep us from wasting money on returns and warranty claims. But now the intended results, I want you to sit down and do an exercise with your leaders that asks them, why do we have our quality management system in the first place? In fact, that's a question I like to open any management system related meeting with. Anytime you're going through something that people would see as we're doing this for ISO, just ask them, why do we even have a quality management system to begin with? And oh, by the way, I want to talk with you about something. Some people look at QMS, quality management system, like the paperwork we have. You know, that's our audits, that's our documents and records, that's our management review, that's our corrective action, those are our quality management system. And I want you to banish that from your thinking. Those are all enabling factors of your quality management system. When I teach implementation of any kind of management system, I say the management system is a systematic way of managing. It is the way we do things around here. We get everyone pulling on the same end of the rope. We get everyone understanding how things are supposed to happen, and we get away from the maverick, the diving catch, the we'll fix it up on the rebound. Okay, the quality management system is our systematic way of managing the business, particularly related to quality. Some folks have integrated management systems, and DESARA will be doing some programs on integrated management systems later in the year. Right now, everybody's real up in arms about how am I going to pass my audit, but we'll move on to that as systems begin to mature. Okay, so now we'll get to the meat of it, the words that everyone's worried about. Defining and monitoring the internal and external issues. Well, what do we mean by internal and external issues? When some people look at this, they look at it as their objectives. Some people say, oh, that sounds a lot like our strengths and weaknesses, or a SWOT analysis, our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Now, I want you to look at this in a little different way. I want you to look at internal issues and external issues as thought starters for where our risks might come from. Okay, these may be a strength today, but if something changed, they could be a weakness tomorrow. Okay, so they could be a risk to our business where today they're an opportunity. So write this down in your workbook. I think I've got space for each of these in your workbook. Things like organizational performance. Think, if your business is tanking in terms of its financial performance, everyone's hair's on fire. They're not talking about, oh, we need to upgrade our compliance. We need to upgrade our ability to follow our procedures and close our internal audit findings on time. They are worried about revenue. So how your organization is performing is going to have a bearing on whether or not you're able to achieve the intended results of your management system. Okay, it could be a risk, it could be an opportunity, because if you're doing very well, suddenly everyone's saying, well, how do we improve our quality? You know, this is a good time to make sure that we're even better than we are. Resource factors, that's talking about things like your infrastructure, such as your IT capabilities or lack thereof. You may be on top of the world with IT right now, and it's a strength. But in the future, if you begin to find that you've got things like some information security issues, suddenly it becomes a risk. You've had shutdowns of your system while they deal with hackers, and now it's a risk to your business that our IT system is keeping us from meeting our customer needs, customer demands, or even doing our business, getting product out on time. Maybe your facility layout is cramped and backwards, and it costs you a lot of extra time and leads to problems. That's a risk. It leads to a risk, but it can also lead to an opportunity. If later on you get a bigger facility with lots of room, you have a chance to lay it out exactly perfectly for you, now it's an opportunity. So what I'm saying on each of these items that I call thought starters are the internal issues for what your risks may be in the future. Human aspects would be things like culture, your relationship with your union, which may be strong or weak, or maybe the languages that are spoken in your business, which may be a help or a hindrance. Those could be a risk to your ability to achieve your goals of your management system, or even to achieve one of the intended results, which would be maintaining certification, like being able to transition on time if you've got multiple languages all over the world and you need to communicate in those, or even with under one roof. I know some companies have like a dozen under one roof. And management related would be things like, are the decisions all made locally, Or do you have to run things through corporate or through a parent company? What happens with your organizational structure? If you've got a stable organizational structure versus one that maybe this year you've had a big organizational change, a structural change. So this year it might be a risk or it might be a big opportunity. Maybe you've got a strong and consistent decision-making process. So that could be a weakness or a strength. Autocratic decision makers can be very helpful to the business in the event of an emergency. Okay, external issues. Same thing. These could be a strength or could be a weakness down the line. So you begin to make, with defining your internal and external issues, you're coming up with a list of the things that could be, depending on how they play out in the current year, current quarter, short and long-term time frame, they could be a strength or a weakness. So economic issues would be things like credit availability, inflation rates in some of the countries where you're doing business, exchange rates if you're doing business internationally. That could affect your ability to achieve your goals. Social factors would be things like the local unemployment rate or the educational levels where you do business, or what are their working days? Do they shut down for a month and everybody goes away during Chinese New Year if that's where you're doing business? Maybe public perception of your company. That could be a social factor, something that's a strength or a weakness in your ability to achieve your goals. In political and legal, we've had things like international trade agreements in the news lately that may or may not affect your business, if you're things like government stability in some countries where you do business. And technological could be things like equipment materials that are available to you, or patents that are expiring for yourselves or for your, that are just going to be available on the market that you could begin to exploit. Now, competition. Some people don't think of competition as needing to be anywhere on your list as an external issue, but it would be if they suddenly got a competitive advantage, like they just got a faster way to make on-time delivery to your customers. They've got some new logistical ways of working that beat you, and suddenly you've got to step up. That is a risk to your ability to satisfy your customers. So look at what the competition is doing ongoing. You should be looking at that in real time, but certainly reviewing it more than just once a year. And we'll talk about management review later in this presentation. Now, I told you I'd talk with you about what auditors expect to see. Now, they're not going to give you a list. What they're going to give you is a checklist that's got a paraphrased ISO 9001:2015 that says, do you have a defined purpose? Do you have, and they might not even say, have you defined your strategic direction? They're not going to ask they will probably say, have you defined the relevant internal and external issues, and do you monitor and review them? And they might even leave off, have you defined your purpose and strategic direction, in a checklist they give you to say, are you ready for your certification audit? And by the way, I'll just mention this here. Most certification bodies, many certification bodies will send you a checklist in advance, and they may ask for it back before they're even willing to come out and do your audit. You have to say, yep, all the way down the list, because they don't want to come out and waste your time and theirs to say, are you ready or not? So expect that sometime a couple of months, even 3 months before your scheduled ISO 9001 transition audit, TL 9000 transition audit. You may or may not have to turn that into them, and it may be yes or no, or it may be guiding the auditor as to what to look at. Yes, we have these, and here's how we have them. Now, it doesn't say you shall document these things, but what auditors expect to see is your purpose and strategic direction ideally documented. The standard doesn't say you have to. It doesn't say it has to be a standalone document. It could be a PowerPoint presentation, and I'll tell you what, there's probably a secret strategic direction document or plan at the very top of your organization that if you're a mid-level manager or an individual contributor, you're never going to see that one, because it might say we're closing our factory here, right? So there will be a higher level strategic direction that nobody will see, and then there will be the one that you want everybody to understand. That at least needs to be something you can share with a certification body, and it should flow from that super top secret one that the board of directors knows about. They would also like to see your internal and external issues identified in writing. You know why? You're expected to monitor and review them. Pretty hard to review something if you don't have it written down. So they would expect to see evidence that you've been monitoring and reviewing. We'll talk about that later, but that could be during management review, or, well, I'll just say this here. Management review is only one way to monitor and review issues. You could have monthly update reports from each of the people responsible for identifying each of those. No change, no change, no change. Here's one we want to keep an eye on, and then every month that's got an update. Now, just a word to the wise. If you have a mature system and you've got a mature system for design controls and a mature system for internal audits and a mature system for, process effectiveness, you should also have a process for all of these things as well. Determining the strategy, identifying the issues, and monitoring and reviewing those issues. You'll be most effective if you have processes rather than it's just an item that, gee, we haven't done that in a while. And you'll wow your auditor if you've already got a process for that. Now, at the end of each one of these crucial clauses, we're going to have a slide like this. You want to copy this down either in a screenshot or in your workbook or in your notes. The big idea of context of the organization is that it affects everything else we're going to do in this standard. You need to systematically, and I say that for real, it's just like anything else, this is a process, define, monitor, and review your purpose, strategic direction, intended results, and relevant internal and external issues. If you say nothing else to management about their role, I shouldn't say if you say nothing else because there are a bunch of big takeaways, but this is something leadership needs to understand. They will be questioned about. At least if they've got a decent auditor, they will be questioned about that as leaders. And then auditors will look at it throughout the rest of the audit to see if it plays out in real life. Okay, moving on, crucial clause number 2. Crucial clause number 2 is to define and monitor the needs and expectations of your interested parties. You almost have to read this one in reverse. Let's read it aloud. Sing along with me from your hymnals, ISO 9001 gurus. It says, due to their effect or potential effect on the organization's ability to consistently provide products and services that meet customer and applicable statutory and regulatory requirements, the organization shall determine A, the interested parties that are relevant. There's that word. Now this time is relevant to your quality management system, not relevant to your strategic direction. The requirements of those interested parties that are relevant to the quality management system. And then you have to monitor and review the parties and their relevant requirements. I draw that distinction. This time we're talking about how those interested parties and their requirements bear on the way we do things around here. Remember, our systematic ways of doing things, not on our documentation specifically. So first of all, what makes someone relevant? Think about that. What makes someone relevant? Well, they're relevant because they have a bearing on your ability to meet requirements of your customer or business. Fill that in your worksheet or get it in your notes because they're not relevant. They're probably not relevant to your quality management system if they're the community where you do business, right? They are not putting demands on your quality management system, on the way you work to achieve the products and services that you deliver to customers. Now, they're probably relevant to your environmental management system. If you have something that's spewing exhaust into the environment, they really care. But as far as how you make your products and services, the community around you may not be. However, your parent organization or your bankers, your insurance company could very definitely have bearing on how you meet the requirements of your customer or your business. So let's look at these. Everyone gets the idea that the relevant interested parties are your customers, suppliers, and employees. Now, this is a busy slide. Take a screenshot of it and come back to it tomorrow. We're now like 35 minutes into the recording. If you want to write this down in your notes to come specifically to this slide, because I'm not going to go over it word for word. Customers, suppliers, and employees, we know they can help or hinder you. Those are obvious. But let's look at the others, like owners and investors. If you need, for example, some new equipment in order to keep up with the marketplace, you've got to make your case for that capital expenditure. So your owners and investors, and your owners may be the parent corporation. Your owners may be the broader corporation that's not within the scope of your certification. So depending on how you define owners, if you're a small business, it could be your bank, right? It could be a small group of family-owned investors, but they are a relevant interested party that you have to keep your eye on, because if they invest their money elsewhere, if they don't give it to you, invest in what you need invested in for the QMS, for how you make products, you're at a disadvantage. So that could lead to, these are all things that could lead to a risk for your business's ability to achieve its quality objectives. Unions, okay, if you've got a union action, That could affect your ability to satisfy your customers, to meet on-time delivery. However, unions could really affect you by being a low turnover workforce with strong skills and knowledge. So you want to list your unions as an interested party and then follow them, monitor them quarter in and quarter out, and monitor them in real time as how that union environment may affect your ability to achieve your goals. So it's something you want to keep your eye on because it could create a risk or an opportunity. When I say partners, those are the people that maybe you provide a solution to a customer for, okay? You may be the widget manufacturer and someone else is the integrator who provides that, or maybe you deal with distributors or somebody. So somebody else who deals with a customer on your behalf, or someone who you take their products and work with them to provide a solution to your customer. Okay, so they would have a role in whether your customer perceives you as achieving what they're paying you for, or how other competitors may see you based on who you're partnering with. So pay attention to your partners. They could provide risks or opportunities. You want to get that partnership arrangement down on paper. Now, do you have to list all of these individual by name? Depends on the context of your organization. If you have hundreds of them, you might just list partners. If you have just one or two, I'd probably list them by name and monitor them individually. Competitors, as before, their increase or decrease in performance, cost, speed, quality, could have market expectations on your companies. And anybody who does business with regulators knows how they have an extreme ability to help you or hinder you in achieving your business. They can shut you down. So you need to define the needs of interested parties, the needs and expectations of them. They have needs for quality, cost, and speed. Also, obviously your customers, your employees have needs in those areas. Your business itself has needs and expectations, such as maintaining ISO certification or maintaining a 5S shop. And then there are legal requirements and regulations. You would need to define what are those for your customers. Now, some companies are just going to list a table that just sort of in general says, oh yeah, we have legal requirements and regulations. And you can just have a nice little document that shows we monitor these. A good auditor, and I'll tell you, over the next 15 years before this thing is revised in a big way, they're going to dig deeper and deeper into how you define the needs and expectations and whether you're monitoring them for risks. This is a big deal if you're a 14001 certified company, that you've got a systematic way of monitoring your local, state, country, and overall international legal requirements and regulations, treaties, things like that could affect your ability. Not so much on the quality side, but suppose you have committed to maintaining a UL or a CE mark certification, you're keeping your eye on those regulations. So here's the big idea. This is what you want to write down for clause 4.2. It's at 37 to 39 minutes into the recording if you want to record that on your notes. The big idea in which you want to share with management, this is not just a simple paragraph in your quality manual. You now need to show that the needs and expectations from the broader range of stakeholders, besides just employees, suppliers, customers, maybe our investors or our parent corporation, the broader range of stakeholders are systematically determined, monitored, reviewed, and updated as needed. It's going to be hard to review and update them if you don't have them written down. Auditors expect to see those things written down, and they'll be digging more and more deeply into how those are done. Okay, crucial clause number 3, moving on. I know I'm talking fast. You may need to go back through the replay because these slides are not filled with so many words that it just spells it out for you. I looked at a webinar yesterday that had, when I looked at what all it had in it, after it explained the company and it explained what it was they wanted you to do after, or got into the Q&A section, there were a grand total of about 6 or 8 slides that meant anything. And they were, that presentation, I didn't attend it live. I got to go back and listen to the talk itself, because they must have said so much in words that wasn't written on the slides. And I'm kind of the same way with you. I give you a few meaty slides, but other than that, you might need to listen to the recording again if you want to prepare for your meeting with your management team. This is why I said bring your standard to class. You might want to highlight these same clauses. These same parts of the clause that I have in here. Clause 4.4.1 looks an awful lot like 4.1 of the old ISO 9001-2008. When I first read it, I'm like, well, there's not that much different. What are they really asking you to do differently? This is one of the biggest changes for some organizations that they'll see in this standard. Because even though ISO 9001 starting back in 2000 said you need to use the process approach, they didn't tell the auditors that, apparently. Companies have been moving along for the last 15 years, even though ISO meant it, without truly using the process approach. So now they've spelled it out what they mean, and auditors have gone through additional training in the upgrade to the standard that the different accreditation bodies are monitoring them on. Have they trained their auditors appropriately to use this new standard? So you need to be up on these. So it says, you have to follow the book, is what it says in the first line. And then it says, you shall determine the processes needed for the quality management system. And that means the inputs and outputs, how those processes work in order and how they interact with each other. And then letter C says that you have to determine and apply the criteria and methods to ensure the effective operation and control of the processes. You know what? Some people took that to mean that you had to have quality objectives and report on your quality objectives. That's one piece of what this means. It means so much more. This means the criteria and methods that you use to look at your process as you're going through it. Okay, you're looking at it in real time, so you don't wait for customer satisfaction data to come back. You're looking at what is your process telling you about how it's operating now, so that you can make changes before it hits the customer. Clause 4.1, old 4.1, new 4.4.1, both say you need to define the resources and the responsibilities and authorities. And 4.4.1 letter G smacks of two things. One, it says corrective action in general. You have to do corrective action if you're not getting your intended results. That's why I told you that last line of intended results. Sit down with management and say, what are the intended results? Because if the intended results are we stay certified, you've really missed the boat on what's involved here. This has to do with on-time delivery. It has to do with controlling your cost of poor quality. It has to do with onboarding new employees. All those things are things that the process approach can help you do. And when we teach this, we guide people to say, what do we really want ISO 9001 or related standards like TL 9000 to do for our business? Okay, so when they say implement changes needed to achieve your intended results or to improve the process, they're talking about overall using the process approach to really run your business. This is an example of how one company defined the sequence and interaction of their processes and also said, what are all of their processes? It was a global company. And I like the way they did this. This is the way we teach it. So coincidentally, they're one of our clients, and this is the way they did it. It's a fairly standard way, but not everyone does it this way. Defines the core processes. This has to do with how did they start from market research to developing a product, validating it in production, and moving all the way through end of life and end of service. As they validated, as they did their first customer ship, these are the things that are feeding into their factory. And then their support process for sales and order management, logistics and delivery are working with the factory as well. So they define their core process, their key support processes, and then all the other support processes. Being a global corporation, they also had some shared services. I like this. It's like they've outsourced human resources to the corporate level. And they've outsourced IT to the corporate level. And then they actually, they call this their senior management team down here at the bottom. I know it's an eye chart. They've got management processes. This company had a whole extra sheet of what do they mean by management processes that they didn't show on this side. But in today's environment, these management processes would have things to do with like defining our strategic direction and our purpose, monitoring and reviewing our internal and external issues and our customers' needs and expectations, and who are our relevant, our relevant interested parties' needs and expectations. So they had a bunch, and budgeting and human resources planning, and all those things were down there in management processes. But as a start, you have to do your core processes, and that for some companies was all they defined. ISO 9001 says all the processes of your management system, including, for example, your internal audit process. That's one of the processes that you should be defining, monitoring, and reviewing. So let me give you some leadership tips on implementing the process approach. Each of your processes should have an owner, and that's the person who can change the process. That's the person who would be reporting those or be on the line for the accountability for the results of that process. So who's the head honcho of the design process? Who set up your design release process? Or who set up your logistics process? Who set up and is accountable for results of your manufacturing process, your shipping process? Those would be the process owners, not necessarily the department leader, because sometimes the process owner sits at a much higher level or even a lower level than the owner that you have on the org chart. But they're the ones that would relate to other process owners and say, hey, we're making a change over here. I want to be sure this doesn't affect you. Or, hey, those outputs of your process, we're your customer, we're not happy with them. That's the process owner, runs interference with the other processes, shows how our process sets up. And then that process owner defines the standard templates for the process, hopefully in relation to the other process owners, so there's some consistency across the business. So for example, the process owner would be responsible for process owners work together to come up with a process interaction diagram like I just showed you for the whole business. And they probably have some standardized process diagrams. We tend to think in pictures in real life, not in policies and procedures. So ideally, and we urge our clients to come up with process diagrams that show their inputs and their outputs, the measures on the process, the resources. We like to use the turtle diagram approach and also swim lane diagrams. That's what we do in our consulting, and that's what we teach in the ongoing course that follows from this webinar. The full 2-day course is using turtle diagrams and using swim lane diagrams, as well as other process artifacts you might like, to also look at risk-based thinking. We'll talk about that in the next crucial clause about how we do risks. Actually, might not be the next crucial clause, maybe the one after that. But still, the swim lanes and turtle diagrams, the procedures, the work instructions that boil it down, and this is a good time to clean house. If you've got too many, not enough, if they're different where they don't need to be different across facilities, or if you need to say, hey, we do things differently, we need some more. And then, of course, this is where you would be keeping, have a definition for your records and the approvals and how we're going to store the documents overall. Mature systems have process for their processes. So if you sailed through your last audit by the fact that you had all these things in place, you're already maybe TL 9000 or ISO 9001 certified, you want to look at, your auditor should be looking at, do you have processes for maintaining your processes, and move you more in that direction. Auditors expect to see, it doesn't say you must document, but to the extent necessary, and I think some companies have too much and some companies have too little. So look at the processes within your scope, management, core, and support. Maybe you only had core processes documented before, make sure, or defined and measured before. Make sure you have the inputs and outputs and the sequence and interaction of all your processes defined. Also make sure that you have measures, what you're going to measure, when and how you're going to measure. It says that in clause 4.4.1. It's even more specific in clause 9. We'll talk about that in one of the later crucial clauses. And then make sure that you've got the people, the equipment, the infrastructure needed for each of your processes. So for example, if you need 24/7 IT support, you don't outsource your IT support to someone in another country who may have spotty internet connection. Your call center needs to be 24/7 on in some cases. Make sure that you've got the infrastructure to support that. Any machinery that needs to be on all the time that you've got backup systems for. That's an example of what auditors should be looking for and possibly should be documented, is what is your backup plan for that infrastructure that needs to be on all the time. Then they'll be looking for the how to do the process, your who does what, how and when, your process documents like that, and then making sure that you've got corrective action and continual improvement in place when your goals aren't met. It also says in 4.1 that you need to have the risks and opportunities associated with the process. We urge you to do that in process definition rather than as some standalone document that looks at the business overall. These should be defined for each of your processes as it says in 4.4.1. Again, we're coming up on that in a minute. So 4.4, the process approach, the big idea, the business is now need to show that the process approach is fully in place. All your processes need to be defined, followed, measured, and improved. In some cases, people used to have just a table like, oh yeah, we do plan, do, check, act. Or yeah, we've got all these processes, and here's a table that shows how all the clauses of ISO 9001 relate to them. That clause matrix is still a good thing to have, but where some companies were able to get away with it with their auditors in the past, that was how they showed they used the process approach, that's not enough anymore. You're going to laugh at me because I thought, oh, my office is so cold. You know what? It's under 65 in here because I turned off my heat so it wouldn't affect the sound. And then I think it's the people who at the start of the call were saying it's snowing sideways up here. Yes, it does get cold down in Dallas, all the way down into the 60s. Okay, crucial clause number 4 after that little break. Let's move on. Crucial clause number 4 is actually a twofer crucial clause. I teased you when I said it was only one clause. We're actually looking at 2 clauses here, clauses 5 and 9. Okay, clause 5.1. Remember I said if you tell top management nothing else, tell them this? I lied. This is the other thing you're going to tell them if you tell them nothing else. And I've emphasized 3 parts of it, subparts A, B, and G here. Top management shall demonstrate leadership and commitment. Now, top management does not mean the president of your corporation. If you're a multi-site, multi-country corporation and you've got the scope of your certification is your site, top management means the head honchos over your scope of certification. So it could be, for example, plant manager and their direct reports, not the president of the parent corporation if all you've got is a local certification. So top management has to demonstrate. It says shall demonstrate. That means the auditors are going to talk to them and they're going to ask them about how are they accountable for the effectiveness of the management system. How do they ensure that the quality policy and objectives are compatible with the strategic direction of the organization and the context of the organization, meaning top management needs to understand the context of the organization and the strategic direction and how those are communicated and flow down to the policy and objectives. And they're responsible for establishing them. And then they also have to demonstrate their leadership in ensuring that the organization achieves its intended results. So those are 3 things that leadership is responsible for. They shall demonstrate. So if you're having a tough time getting leadership on board, flash in this clause and say the auditors are going to be spending some time with you, so let's get you up to speed on what you have to do. This is one of the clauses you want to show them, clause 9.1.1. It says the organization shall determine. Now, if you tried to let every individual contributor in the organization determine what needs to be monitored and measured and how it's going to be done and when and where the measuring is going to be performed, and letter D, how it's going to be analyzed and evaluated, and if the grassroots effort to evaluate the effectiveness of the management system, that's not going to fly, right? You can't say quality is everyone's responsibility and we're all going to do this together. When it says the organization shall determine, top management may flow that down several levels for the individual processes. At the very top, they're going to be responsible for determining what needs to be monitored and measured. And typically process owners are responsible for doing A through D within their process. Auditors should be looking for that to be sure it's done. And you as implementers, whether or not your auditor looks for it, your business is going to be stronger if you genuinely and sincerely apply 9.1.1. So we spend a lot of time when we're implementing ISO 9001 and related standards with our clients, making sure this is done. Now, TL 9000 has been strong on this all along. So have other related standards. All of ISO 9001 general has maybe not been, general commercial businesses may not have been as strong. We mean it this time. That's what ISO is telling you because they put more specifics in there, like what and when and who is going to do what. 9.3.1 on management review. This is another thing that leadership needs to know about. Often the quality manager, the head honcho quality, will be leading by the nose through this, but you need to be sure that they understand that management review is looking for not just continuing suitability of the quality management system, but also its alignment with the strategic direction. Does the way we do things around here continue to align with what they may have changed. They may have said, oh my gosh, we've just gotten word from corporate that we're going to spin off because of the way business is doing. So does the management system support that? So within management review, there are some things that need to change in what you've been doing all along. One is changes in the internal and external issues that are relevant to the quality management system. That's what I said in 4.1, where it said these are our issues, and now management has to review this. This does not mean management has to review it at the once-a-year dog and pony show. Let me tell you this, this is just a hint. If your idea of management review is a once-a-year dog and pony show that you show the auditor that you did it, you're selling yourselves short. You don't review financials once a year. You don't review sales once a year. Now, maybe there's a big, as part of the strategic planning process, you look at a big roll-up for the year and you look at some key issues. But just as businesses look at sales and issues that come up with respect to financial stuff on a monthly basis, or certainly on a quarterly review basis as they go into, are we going to make any changes to our capital plan, for example? You should be looking at quality on a more frequent schedule than once a year, I'll tell you that. And you may need to guide your auditor through how you do it, but this is your management system, not something you do for auditors. So you should be looking at those changes in external and internal issues. Ongoing is ideal, as it says in ISO 9004, that's what the most mature systems have. The least mature systems are doing it as a once-a-year exercise. So at least be able to show you've done once a year, that you're looking at those changes. This is also an ideal time to be looking at changes in the internal and external interested parties' expectations and needs. But you're probably looking at those on an ongoing basis anyway already, at least for customers and for suppliers. Okay, so then you want to look at information on the performance and effectiveness of the quality management system, including trends. This is why I say do this on an ongoing quarterly basis. Always be looking at a rolling 4-quarter or longer, if that's your planning horizon, or whatever is your planning horizon. Look on a rolling basis for trends in monitoring and measurement results. Okay, you maybe only do audits once or twice a year, so maybe you're only looking at those in one or two of your management review meetings. You may be looking at audit results more because they're pretty standard. You may be looking at those, passing those around in written form and only bringing up highlights in meetings. Not everything on this list needs to be done in meeting format or by every level of management at the same level of granularity. So take a look at how you do management review. Now is a great time for getting your management team involved. If you're having trouble with management buy-in, talk with them more about how valuable is management review and what would they really like to do. Because if they think they're doing it just because ISO says so, no sir, no ma'am, you're doing this because it's the way you run the business. Use this transition time as a chance to make it right for knitting itself into the strategic direction of the business. Quality management system is the way we do things around here overall, particularly with respect to achieving quality of products and services and customer satisfaction. Okay, so what are auditors looking for? They are looking for the process approach, as well as the 7 quality management principles that are listed at the front of your standard that you should definitely go through and use in your ongoing education of your organization. They're looking for a policy. You've got a quality policy, go through it with your team to be sure that it is driven by the strategic direction in the context of your organization. It may need an upgrade this time around. Because, for example, if you're growing through new products and innovation, if you're growing through being first to market with stuff and meeting your launch dates on time, that ought to be reflected in your quality policy. And it ought to be reflected in your objectives too. It ought to flow down. That quality policy and quality objectives need to flow down to relevant functions, levels, and now, new word in the standard in section 5, that your objectives flow down to your processes. We should have a line of sight between those. It's one of the first things I look at when I'm talking to a process owner. How do your process objectives flow line of sight up to the quality policy by way of measurable objectives? And then they'll be looking for the results according to your plan, as well as, starting at the top, risk-based thinking. I know that's the clause you've all been waiting for. We're coming to that in a minute. The leadership and performance, big idea. Copy this down, take a screenshot. Leaders are no longer just getting a courtesy call in audits. They are accountable for QMS performance, and this time around in the audit, they will be asked to answer more questions on, to show evidence of, to show how they work with the organization on planning, on the process approach, on reviewing performance and making the necessary changes to achieve results. Leaders should jump on board with this because this version of ISO 9001 is performance focused. If you're having trouble communicating that to your leadership team, you need to do a leadership briefing where you take them through what's changed to make ISO more that way. And your bonus that you'll get at the end of the presentation will help guide you in that direction, but you may want to customize it based on what your leadership team needs. Dang, 12 o'clock my time, and we're still going into crucial clause number 5 and 6. Now you see why I made this a 90-minute webinar. Couldn't cram it in to a single hour. I want you to be able to take this stuff out of this webinar and use it right away. If it's not enough for you, we got you covered. But right here, let's go into crucial clause number 5, the one everybody's been waiting for, risk-based thinking. And I know we need to do another webinar specifically on risk-based thinking. We spend a lot of time on it in the full class, and I give away a little bit of it here. But yes, we'll do some more on this, but it's just not going to be on the timing that most people need just to get up to speed to get through their initial certification. Okay, so where does 6.1, where does crucial clause number 5, risk-based thinking, show up in the standard? Well, everyone jumps to clause 6.1 on risk-based thinking, but it's referenced or implied in at least 13 clauses. In fact, it starts, I didn't show you this in clause 5 before, but this is what leaders need to know. They have to demonstrate their leadership and commitment in 5.1.1 letter D, promoting the use of the process approach and risk-based thinking. Now, wouldn't that mean that leadership needs to understand what we mean by the process approach and risk-based thinking? And shouldn't they and their project management office be particularly delighted to hear that the standard talks about analyzing and addressing risks? Well, it does in a lot of places, but we're going to go through a few of the key ones right here. In clause 6.1, it says that when planning for the quality management system, okay, so when planning the way we do things around here, so you see how that ties to the process approach when we're planning our individual processes, we're going to consider, we're going to jump back to 4.1 and 4.2. I told you we're going to go back to those issues and requirements and look at what do we need to do, what are the risks and opportunities we need to do to make sure we can achieve our intended results. Going right back to that exercise I said to do with your leadership team, and with every level, what are the intended results of our way we do things around here? Why are we doing this ISO stuff? Well, we want to look at the risks and opportunities that are going to affect our ability to get our intended results, and then make sure that we capitalize on the opportunities and prevent or reduce the negative things that can happen from risks actually becoming realities, and making sure that we can achieve improvements. So 6.1 says in clause 6.1, and we're about to look at 6.1.2, we start with when we're planning our quality management system. And second, we look at what are the actions we take to address risks and opportunities. So we need to have plans to address risks and opportunities. So let me tell you this, when you planned a production process or a service process, didn't you look at the fact that something could go wrong around here? So we're going to put an inspection point here, or we're going to put a measurement on the process. We're going to be sure the oven is the right temperature. We're going to make sure that we use calibrated equipment, because if we're not using calibrated equipment, we've got a risk of putting out poorly measured product. So already, everything that you've done in ISO 9001-2008 was already set up to look at risks. Not so much opportunities, but definitely to look at risks in provision of production products and services, but not so much to look at risks in other areas. So let me show you what we're talking about there. But what they say is you want to plan to integrate those into the way we do things around here, and we want to evaluate the effectiveness of those actions. Evaluating the effectiveness of the actions better not start with how good or bad is our customer satisfaction. You want to be looking at the effectiveness of your risk mitigation in real time, of how is it working. But notice it says that your actions should be proportionate to the potential impact. What that means is don't spend $1 to save a dime. Don't try to protect against earthquakes in Dallas, Texas. They can happen, particularly with fracking. We get little earthquakes now and then, but it's not like living on a fault line in Alaska, California, Japan, something like that. You can bet that the people in Japan have a lot more disaster recovery and business continuity plans related to natural disasters than the people in the middle part of America who aren't subject to tornadoes. Okay, for those areas that aren't. So what risks are they asking you to talk about? What are those relevant risks you need to look at? Well, that's why I said in 4.1 and 4.2, those are your checklists. That's your tickler list. Those internal and external issues and the needs and expectations of your interested parties are the first place you look to say, what could get in the way of us achieving our objectives? Okay, it could be something that you said was an internal issue with respect to your workforce. We've got a union that has a contract coming up. That's an internal issue. And as you're scanning for what are your risks in this review, you're saying, oh my goodness, this is the year of the contract. We got to pay attention to that because things go wrong when the union gets involved in that year. That's very real for some companies. Others might say, oh, we've got an external issue. Our competition is bringing out its new products a little ahead of us. That's a risk. What are we going to do to either expedite ours or to keep our customers satisfied so they don't jump ship? That's a risk. And we're going to have to take that into account in the way we do things around here. So you're looking at any risks related to achieving your results, being hurt by negatives, or getting the most out of things that could happen that you're hoping happen, like we get that new contract. Let me give you an example of an opportunity. I was dealing with a client who is trying like mad to grow. They're trying to get in with the big service providers, like AT&T or Verizon, big wireless providers, Telcel or T-Mobile, things like that. So they're saying, if we get, we've just got a big sales proposal out here for this new product of ours, and we're looking at getting into this particular service provider for the first time. We don't want to blow it. So obviously you don't want to be hurt by any negatives, but it's an opportunity because you want to get the most out of the positives. If they give you their first pilot order, or if they place that giant order on you, you better have a plan in place to quickly ramp up. That would be an example of what's our ramp up plan if we get this order. I don't know if you've ever had sales dump an order on you that says, what were you thinking? We're going to dissatisfy a lot of people to make this for this new customer so they think we always can. That's an example of not planning related to an opportunity. Okay, so practical application. Another one of those slides where an hour and 7 to 9 minutes into our presentation here. If you want to put that in your notes, be sure you copy down as much of this as you can. Most people are already have these middle ones around products and services and processes. For example, you've got design controls in place. You've got production controls. When do we take measurements? When do we stop the line if something bad happened? You've got a lot of stuff related to complexity of your products and services, or related to ECOs, changes that a customer may do on the fly. You've got things related in your processes for how do we deal with changes. We know how to deal with ECOs. We know how to deal with capacity constraints. We know how to deal with if we don't have all the information that we need. We know how to get that information or make sure it's available on the line when we need it. Okay. You've probably also got risks related to suppliers, like you keep a certain amount of safety stock because you know that their capacity constraints could change, or you've got a new contract coming up and you've built up a lot of supply. So you could have, they can affect your outcome by having a new a supply glitch for your suppliers. So you want to list what are those kinds of risks related to suppliers, risks related to your products and services and your processes. How about risks related to your people? If you lose someone who's a key knowledge holder, or if you have turnover, or if they have errors, well, some of those things you've already got in place, like cross-training or error reduction, or you've got people who are, maybe you're building up some talent through internships because you know that you're going to have some turnover. People are going to want promotions, might leave for other companies. So you've got some internships, maybe with a local trade school, or maybe with a local college where you're bringing some people in at the entry levels. The two big ones that 6.1.1 is talking about that most companies did not take into account or think that it was related to ISO 9001. TL 9000 had this in there. Some companies didn't do a very good job of it, but other companies need to take this into account. Risks to your infrastructure. If you don't have disaster recovery plans or business continuity plans, you don't have something that protects you from major IT downtime or information security threats, your auditor should be pointing that out to you and raising a nonconformity, because that's a risk to just about any business now. You need to at least have rudimentary coverage for some sort of downtime to your infrastructure. What if your power gets cut off, right? What if the water gets cut off because of local construction? Do you have some sort of processes in place for those kinds of things? Those are going to be asked about now in audits where they never were before. They should be anyway, and you should build those into your internal audit program. Now, the business risks. These are things that could be related to external issues, and they could also be related to internal issues such as relocation or reorganization. When you get a new big system, are you actually taking into account the risks to the business overall? Have you taken into account the risk to the products and services? Often those big business risks are handled at a high level, and they forget this could affect our ability to serve customers right now. Now, ISO 9001 does not require you to have a risk management system. Some other standards do. ISO 27001, for example, requires a lot more related to risk with formal methods of handling things than you're required to have in ISO 9001. It could be different from design to production to sales to infrastructure. So you could have different methods and different levels of formality across processes. In fact, in production, it's probably already built in for your routine changes and so forth. But you have to be, leadership has to know how all those things are handled and be able to demonstrate their commitment. In general, you have to have some method of identifying the risks and opportunities in every process, as it's said in clause 4.4. And then you have to have ways of analyzing potential impact, planning responses, and periodically reviewing and updating your risk plans so that you're sure you can handle what comes down your way. Here's something your CB won't tell you, but your friends at DESARA do. The fact is, you can get away with very little for certification compared to what you've done in the past. A lot of auditors aren't real strong on auditing this. They'll sign you off on that you have the basics in place for products and services and some of the larger risks to your company. Your first transition audit, they may not ask you about disaster recovery or even business continuity. But we'll talk a little bit in the next crucial clause about the way they will audit towards this. But if you do a sloppy job or just say, oh, folks, you really don't have to worry about this, it's not anything very different from before, good luck getting buy-in next time, because you can't say, well, it's a change due to ISO 9001 2015. Leverage the change to do a good job. And you know what? There's an opportunity there for you. First of all, it's an opportunity for you to shine as a leader for bringing up something that the business needs and should be doing anyway, and walking them through a systematic process for it. But also, if you work with folks to have a good plan in place, it could lead to a market advantage. Your competitors may be plagued by the same downturn or something, the lack of availability of parts that you are, but you had a risk plan in place and you were good to go. You were able to keep your production running when somebody else wasn't, because you had a good risk plan in place. So it's a good idea to do it. Even if you can get away with a lot that your auditor says, oh, no problem, we'll walk you through that, no problem. Don't listen to them. Do it for the right reasons. So this is what the big idea says. Consider the issues you face and the requirements of your interested parties. That means going back to 4.1 and 4.2. What could keep you from achieving your goals? Right here, we're at about an hour and 13, hour and 15 into the presentation. If you want to write that down on this page to come back to this section, what could go wrong? What could stop it from happening? And what could you do if it did happen? You should have those in place for the risks facing each process. I'm talking big time process approach here. Okay, there's a final crucial clause number 6, planning for change. It says, when you determine the need for changes to your way of doing things around here, the changes will be carried out in a planned manner. And whenever you see A through D, this is an auditor's paradise. Except in this case, you notice it doesn't say. You need to have documents that show the purpose and potential consequences, how it affects the integrity of the management system, the resources and responsibilities. Okay, couple key words here. First of all, planned manner. Doesn't say it, hints at documentation. Okay, records that you planned, or a template for how are we going to plan, right? That hints at documentation. It doesn't say it has to be documented. Auditors are going to look for it, and your business will be better off if you do it. Shall consider. That's another cousin of documentation. Whenever you see something that says shall consider, you should show in a template where you may have NA blanks on it if it's not applicable, or in a procedure that says go through these steps. If some of these don't apply to you, it's okay to pass them up. But just that you show that you've looked at the purpose so everyone knows why we're changing and potential consequences. Oh, that sounds suspiciously like risk. You've considered the risks of a change, which I told you back in looking at major business changes. You've looked at what could go wrong. You've looked at, do we have to change anything in the way we do things around here overall? That's letter B, the integrity of the management system. And then you've, of course, looked at resources, responsibilities, and authorities. Let's break that down a little bit. Auditors are likely to look at several changes you've made, maybe a big product change, maybe a big process change, and maybe they'll even say, tell us about how you planned for transitioning to ISO 9001 2015. So they'll ask for several of those. They may even say, let's look at a change that's in process or a change that's on the way and see, are you actually doing this, or did you dress something up for me just for the sake of the audit? They'll look at short-term and long-term changes. You can expect over time, auditors are going to look more and more deeply at this once they're sure that you have the baseline ISO 9000 2015 in place. And they'll look for, do you have evidence of planning all those things that it said on the last slide? When you're planning for changes, now you've already got built into your processes, what do you do when you have a line change? What do you do when you have an ECO? If you bring new employees on routinely, you've got an onboarding procedure for new employees. So while this applies to routine changes, what I'm calling out in this crucial clause is the fact that you need to make this for the bigger changes that the business makes. Look at it more carefully. You know where this was covered last time? This is technically not a change to ISO 9001 2015 because it used to say that management must review planned changes to the organization that could affect the QMS. So they took that two words, planned changes, from management review clause, and they turned it into all of 6.3. This is what planned changes has always meant. When you do a big Six Sigma project, when you get new equipment or a new location, or when you have a reorganization or an acquisition or merger, when you get a big IT rollout, or if you outsource something or have a seasonal adjustment, have you really planned for it with communicating why we're making the change, what could go wrong, what needs to change in the way we do things around here? Like, do we need to redocument anything? Do we need to retrain anyone? Do we need to modify some of our processes for this big change? Maybe we need to relook at how our swim lane diagram or our turtle diagram looks, and analyze how big are the changes we need to make. And then you need to show, you want to plan for a big change. What are your resources doing before, during, and after? If you're asking the same people to make a bunch of big changes at once, chances are that you're going to run out of bandwidth on those people. So look at the slide 6.3, the big idea, and I want you to take this for all non-routine changes affecting the way you work. I put that asterisk because it says product and service changes, the routine changes are handled in the other clauses. For example, in design controls, it talks about what do you do with changes? Or in production, it says, what do you do, when you change things? But anyway, you have to have plans that show all these things we just talked about. Plans doesn't say they must be written down, but it's real hard to review and amend them if they're not. Okay, so you may have a project manager over major changes. They should build these things into their project management plans. Now that brings us to a recap, and moving on towards the end of our presentation, we'll be doing our drawing, we'll be doing our bonus in just a minute, but let's just recap, and I'm going to ask for a poll to be put up now, where I'm going to ask you that for all of these, which one would you say is the, as the poll comes up, we're going to say, how well does your organization meet ISO 9001 2015 today? Okay, wherever you are in your transition process. So you might say we've nailed it if you've gone sailing through your audit and I didn't introduce anything new in this presentation, that you say, we finished our audit, we're good to go, and you didn't tell me anything I didn't already know because we had a perfect, I'm going too far on the nailed it part. Not that you had a perfect, but that you're happy with where you are. Okay, and of course you'll continually improve, but you understood all these things. I'm interested to see who falls there. But let's recap those clauses. Context of the organization. Have you documented those in a way that you can share with an auditor? Do you understand them as an organization? Does your leadership team get it? Same thing with interested parties, needs and expectations. All the full range of stakeholders. And then the process approach. Is it fully implemented, not just across your production processes, but across all your processes? And then looking at crucial clauses 4, 5, and 6, how well does leadership understand what they're supposed to do with respect to planning, the process approach, reviewing performance, and working through managing change? Remember, they should expect a deeper level of audits. And then risk-based thinking. Do you have, across all of your processes and across all of your big changes, some way of analyzing what could go wrong to keep you from achieving your goals? How are you going to prevent it, and what are you going to do if it happens? Not just for production processes, but for the business as a whole, for your suppliers, for people, for infrastructure, looking at how would you do business continuity if something big happened in your organization? And then planning for change, showing that what we just talked about, that you've got methods for planning and ensuring the effectiveness of a change, including detailed plans where they have you looked at why the change and the risks and what changes and who does what throughout the change, before, during, and after, that's part of your project management process. Okay, let's look at the results of the poll. I see that, oh, this is fantastic. They're the people who are not implementing, okay. But out of everybody else, it looks like about a quarter of the people overall who are on this call are saying we've nailed it. This is delightful to say we're either ready for our audit, with all the things you told me, Karen, we're ready to go. And then we've got everybody else divided pretty evenly between some progress and we're well understood, but we're working our way through it. Okay, so knowledge is one thing. Where the people say some progress, about a third of the people on this call are saying some progress, we need more. What if we need more? Or what if we're still writing and training and we just need to be sure we hit our deadline and hit our goal? Or maybe that also means continual improvement method. So what if you need something more? I'm going to put up another poll now. And I want you to say where you stand on what you might need more of. What else do you need more of? What's your top need? Because you might need a bunch of these things, but what would you say is your top need? Well, what if you need more? You might need more detailed knowledge. Okay, this was a good start. I introduced you to a bunch of clauses, but what do you need? What do you need? Maybe you need more training for yourself and your organization as a whole. You've studied it, but other people haven't. Or what about you need some more help on planning? You know, you're doing this on your own, but now you need to get everybody in on a plan. You need to make a detailed plan. Maybe you need a gap assessment to even be able to make that plan. That would fall under either detailed knowledge, or a detailed plan could fall under needing a gap assessment. Certainly your management team needing to know what's new for them. That's a big step that might be your greatest need. And if they know that, maybe they'll get on board more. And maybe it's something about templates and cheat sheets and ways that you can guide others through implementation. You've got a plan, so and you know what you need to know, but you need some your next big step of something that you need is coming up with, how am I going to guide people through these changes? All right, looking at this, are all the polls in? We're going to close it in 3, 2, 1. Poll is closed, and it looks like what we've got here is most people feel like they've got pretty good detailed knowledge, but they're looking for detailed plans and getting management to understand, which could include a management briefing, which you're about to get your bonus so you can go with them, or it may mean more detailed planning for managers on those things that affect them the most, some detailed training and walking them through what you need them to actually do. And then others need a detailed plan. Or some help getting guidance. So it's really split between the major ones are the detailed plan and the management to understand. So you can either do this all yourself, or maybe you're in the option where you need some training and then you'll be prepared to do it yourself. Or maybe you're in the position where you need some short-term targeted support just exactly where you need it. Well, for those reasons, those are the things that we see people typically need, we've developed some solutions. I'll just tell you, please save your money and do not have somebody come in and say, we'll do this for you. I've seen a company out there that says, and actually there's several companies, but one that's pretty big, pretty well known across LinkedIn and some other areas, that says, we'll come in and do it for you. Just hire us, we'll give you a quote, we'll set you up. You can continue to use our software to manage your system, and that's really where they're making money on the back end. They lowball you on the front end, but then you're using their software to manage everything going forward. If they say this is a software solution, or if your auditor says this is no big deal, beware. Now, that is not to say there are some excellent solutions out there. Like I know many of our clients use ETQ. As it covers their documentation repository, it covers their corrective action. They use a software solution to enable their system, but they didn't have a company come in and set up their system for them that relies on software. Just fill in the blanks. Please don't do that. So what would I have you do? Well, that's what I'd like to invite you to. What we do. Our virtual instructor-led training program. We have some clients who need it now. I've looked at the traveling road shows of training that comes around, one city a week. They have trainers in different cities, and you need it now. You can't wait for them, and you can't fly to the cities where they are, and you can't take time off even to go to a local training if it happens to be in your city. And now you're wary because I've told you that CVs can only tell you so much. They can't be specific and give you those things, those inside scoop like we just gave you. And you're doing all the study you can on your own, but you need something more. So we're offering virtual instructor-led training. It's easy to attend and affordable. I'm going to give you the price in just a minute. And I hope that you've seen through what we do here that we give you reliable, thorough information. We've got you drinking through a fire hose here, but we spread it out a little bit more and have a little bit more time to ask, well, definitely time to ask questions and so forth. It's interactive and it's application oriented. I give you lots of examples about what to do and how to do it. This is not just to get you up to the starting line. It's not just how to recognize minimal compliance like CB level training would do, but it focuses instead on the main things you need to be doing that are going to matter most to your business. So I'd like to invite you to attend the 6 crucial steps to ISO 9001 2015 success, how to transition on time, and especially if you've already transitioned, how to make a positive impact on the business with this standard that we're going to be stuck with for the next 15 years or so. There's a lot to learn about it. We're offering this April 3rd and 5th, and we break it down into 3 2-hour modules on Tuesday and 3 on Thursday, so that and you can get the replay for up to 30 days. You'll do it just like you're doing this webinar from your desk, and you'll listen through your phone or through your computer using Webinar Jam. Right now, we're offering it for $659, but I'm sorry, $695. A little dyslexic there. For $695 now per person, but after in the last week before we go live, it'll go up to $795. So I urge you to register early so that we can see how many sections we'll need to offer at the same time. Also, I have cleared my calendar for the next 3 weeks so that I'm available to offer this for your own company. If you have more than 3 people who need this training, I urge you to have us come in. It's cost effective to do it as a group because we can answer your specific questions and we can do it on the timing you want, on your time zone. And if you want to do, say, several 4-hour sessions, 4 4-hour sessions, whatever you want to do, we'll 3 4-hour sessions, however, we can do that for you. So get in touch with me, drop me a line if you want to do this just for your company at your selected times and dates. I've already had some companies pick me up on that. So what you get 2 days of live instructor-led training. It's like me talking like this to you. It's not looking at talking slides, reading slides to you. Yeah, I read a lot off my slides, but it's much more interactive of how things really work. We go through the entire ISO 9001 2015 requirements, all those little ones that I didn't tell you about, but then we talk a lot about the implementation planning for these 6 crucial steps, which require the biggest changes. I'll have some checklists to make sure you get it all done. And then templates, like I said, don't buy a software project to try to get it done, a software package that says we'll do this for you. These are not procedure templates. These are like, how do you do the 6 crucial clauses with all the things that you need to look at to be sure that you cover those. It's like making sure you cover the clauses rather than procedure templates. And then we'll have some activities for you to take back to the job, and you can, you have the replay availability, and you'll get a certificate where you can get 1.2 CEUs. We start with a leadership briefing. This is the stuff that we sell for $250 a head for leaders when we offer it as a standalone leader training program. We also do this for just leadership teams. But this will be, and talk about their particular leadership needs. We can do that for your company if you wanted to just come in and focus on the leadership briefing. But we start this out with that so that you can take that with you, take those slides and present them to your own company if you feel like doing that. Sometimes hard to be a prophet in your own land. But then we go into, we take off our leadership hats and put in our implementer hats and do the in-depth study of ISO 9001:2015, where we're talking about applications. Particularly on the second day, we emphasize the applications. What do you do with your implementation team? And then we go into the how do you perform a gap assessment, project planning and execution, and we'll give you some sample plans on the timing and the sequence of actions that you would take with your company. And then we talk about the final steps in getting ready for your certification audit. For example, internal audits. Some companies have been taken by surprise when their certification body comes in and gives them a nonconformity because they didn't do a full round of internal audits to show that their full system complies with ISO 9001:2015. They may have just done a sampling of audits to show that, yes, in key areas we've shown that we've implemented the changes in the standard because we're just doing a surveillance audit. This isn't about doing just a survey, just doing a sample of your requirements. Even if it's a surveillance audit, you need to show you've done a full round of internal audits so that you can be certified to the new standard. Talk with your certification body. If you don't understand what I said, will they be expecting you to have done a full management system audit and a full management review, everything that's listed on the management review sheet, rather than just requirements clause, rather than just the changes themselves. And you'll need to have any corrective actions done against those. Readiness assessments, you may do a mock CB audit, for example, and that's something that DESARA can do. We can come out and do the internal audits. We can come out and do a readiness assessment. We can do targeted internal audits of just certain processes that you'd like to have audited overall. So we'll talk about that in the class, what you need to do to be ready, and I'll answer your questions directly for your company in there. Well, everybody wants to know about the cost comparison. I've done the market research for the DESARA group. The big companies with the big advertising budgets are offering this content, and I actually think it's lesser content because they start with the basics, and our class is an intermediate to advanced class where we go into really the nitty-gritty. They're offering it for $1,000 each, so $1,000 a head for a 2-day class, and you have to take time away from work and you may have to travel. This is a slide you show the boss. If you want to take DESARA's virtual instructor-led training, you let them know. Let me sign up now. It's $6.95. I don't have to take time away from work. I encourage you to take it from home if you've got high-speed internet so that you're not interrupted. No travel associated with it there, and you've got the replay for 30 days, which you don't have if you go through the management. If you go through the one where you have to travel to. Okay, so here's the bonus. I promise, these are the bonuses related to the class, and then I'm going to give you the bonuses for this webinar today. I'll go through these real quickly. I've got 3 bonuses for you. First of all, I said the first module is the leadership module. I'm going to give you a login code for a colleague of yours, or preferably the manager in charge of the rest of the team, to bring them to that first 2-hour module, and they'll get a certificate that they went through the management briefing. No additional cost, regularly a $250 management briefing class that they go through. They can go through that and see if they want to do it with the rest of their management team, for example, if they come. Second one, this is an unheard of bonus. If you sign up for this at $6.95 or at the $7.95 rate, you get to apply that $695, $795 rate, or up to 2 people's worth. So, $1,600 toward your on-site future engagement with the DESARA group sometime in the coming year. And you can see for yourself through our webinar if DESARA is right for your company. And so if you want future targeted support or internal training or one of those internal audits, you get to apply your course fee to the overall bill for that training. And the third bonus is that if you register by March 17th, obviously you get the $6.95, you're saving the $100, but during the month of April, we'll be doing office hours. Targeted small group sessions. It won't be recorded. There may be multiple companies present, but that's where you ask your specific questions. You'll be in on that if you register before March 17th, so we know how many sections of this we're going to need to teach. So as promised, I'm 3 minutes late, but here's the bonus for everyone who stayed to the end of the session. Okay, you go to www.desaragroup.com/bonus. And the good thing about this bonus that you get, it's called Talking Points for Management Teams, and you'll get it in either PDF level if you just want to use it out of the can, teach a class for your teach a 30-minute webinar of your own for your management team, or you can just pull out the selected slides from it, brand it your own way, because you also get the something that most people don't give you. This bonus gives you the actual PowerPoint slides rather than only a PDF, so you can customize it for your team, put in little pop-up notes and things like that. So go on over there and pick that up. Second thing, I said that I'm going to do a drawing for Amusing Confessions of an International Consultant, the latest book out by one of our consultants, Mark Hale. So I can't see the names as while I'm leading the webinar. I can't see the names of who is on the list here. So we're going to call on a certain number. I'm just going to think of a number between I can see how many people are on the call. So I'm going to think of a number, and Teresia, after the call, will find out who the winner is and will notify you by email, and we'll also ask you the secret code. I'm going to say you have to give me the secret word if you win, and the secret word is magic. Okay, the secret word is magic. Say the secret word and divide $100. No, you don't get to divide the book, but if you know the secret word, if you don't know the secret word because you just kept your computer running, then you don't get the bonus. It goes to the next in line. But the magic number for the person who wins is person number, I'm going to say 27. Person number 27 on our attendance list will get this bonus. And now we move into Q&A. And so for anyone who can stay, I'll stay until all the questions are answered. And you'll get a copy of Crucial Clauses of, if you have any questions today about today's content or about what's coming up in the 6 crucial steps to ISO 9001 2015 success, about the 2-day paid program that we're having April 3rd and 5th, or any other questions about ISO 9001 2015. You know, the funny thing is I can see people are all staying on the line. It's like everybody's still here. I know that we promised you an hour and a half and we're going a little bit over, but I get a little enthusiastic sometimes. So you can chat your questions in. Teresia will feed them to me. And I'll also bring some up that happened in some of the other classes. So one of them that came in is from, I believe it says, well, I'm not going to risk butchering this name. You'll know who you are. ISO 9000, it starts with an S, I'll tell you that. It says in ISO 9001 2008, we wrote a process for preventive action, but in the 2015 version, it says risk. Is my understanding correct? Yes, they did take the procedure for preventive action out. You're no longer required to have a procedure for that. I wouldn't lose it if it's been something that you actually use, but what it said in preventive action, by removing that clause, it was redundant. It was a redundant clause in the standard because they've said up front in 6.1, like we went through, they've said that you need to look at all your processes for the risks, for the things that you can prevent from happening. And it doesn't mean you just look at them once, the very first time you set up a process. It means on an ongoing basis you look at them. That's why you have the issues and the interested parties' needs and expectations. So instead of just having a preventive action procedure for when somebody says, aha, we had a problem, we need to prevent this from happening in the future, or uh-oh, I see some sort of risk out there. Now, instead of needing a procedure for it, it's embedded into 6.1 saying that you need to be doing this throughout your management system. Okay, so I have another one here, a question that came up in a session yesterday. It said, is assigning a risk priority number on identified risks and defining the threshold number when actions are to be taken acceptable for clause 6.1? And I'm going to give you an answer that sounds like either a consultant or a certification body. And the answer is, it depends. What does it depend on? When I teach this class, everybody knows the answer and they practically shout it back out at me when they ask a question and I won't give them a yes or no. It depends on the context of your organization. Okay, when you write up the context of your organization, you can write up, we've got a defined risk management system that relies on a numerical approach to this. Or you could say, within your design process, maybe you have a numerical calculation of which are our risks that we're going to go after first. Or maybe you have that within your infrastructure management in infrastructure risk planning, you've got numerical stuff. But in terms of how you do stuff for production or how you do stuff for suppliers, maybe you don't use that same method. So it depends. It's one way that you could reach it. And I'll give you how that works. You would say, what is the likelihood on a scale of 1 to 10? And then what would of some risk happening? And then you'd say, what is the impact of that thing happening on a scale of 1 to 10? And you say, oh my gosh, the likelihood of this happening, we've seen short orders, for example, orders that are shipped without everything in them that are supposed to. We've seen that happen with some regularity. Let me give that a 7. And what is the impact? And you say, you know what? We ship daily to our clients. If we miss anything, they're a little disappointed, but we don't have real-time sensitive stuff. The impact of that is, say, a 2 or 3. It might impact customer satisfaction. You multiply those together and you get a number, and something else might be a 9 and an 8. And you say, wow, we're going to take action for everything over a level 60 risk. And we're going to say the others are things that, we don't really need to worry about. So that's what that question was about. We had another question about can I get I said this already, you will get a recording of this. You are welcome to invite other people to this afternoon session, and you're welcome to share your replay with other people. So when other people sign up, they'll have to input their name and information. And with that puts us 10 minutes past time. I know some people are staying on just in case some other interesting questions have been asked. For some of the other good questions that have been asked in other sessions, I'm going to be writing blog posts on those. So you can just go on over to DESARAgroup.com, look for articles, blog posts, and you'll see that there are some good articles there for you. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close the webinar. Thank you very much for coming to the webinar today. And I hope that if you know of other people who'd like this, you'll give them the replay, you'll forward your invitation to our next webinars to them, you'll share these with your colleagues, because like I said, this is the way the DESARA group goes ahead and makes sure that we are that we're serving our needs, that our interested parties' needs, we're in touch with them, and we give you a sample of the work that